Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, dust them off, and remind ourselves why it is we like them so much. My name's Tom Galley, and joining me today we've got Tony Pasculi.
Thanks, Tom.
And today we are talking about one of my former favorites,
no.
Moby Dick. Okay, that's a little bit harsh. But yeah, Moby Dick is our subject today.
All right. So I usually ask, why is this one of your favorites? But I think you've decided in the process that it's no longer worthy of that title.
Well, it is subject for debate at this point.
Okay.
Apparently it has really been a long time since I read this. And I had forgotten, much like my experience with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's a lot of tedium involved in this book, which is unfortunate because the thing I love most about this book is the language. The language is delightful, and it's consistently delightful all the way through, and it persists in being delightful during these tedium chapters. So that really gives me mixed feelings, you know?
All right. Question, because Moby Dick is a notorious slog, which I disagree with, although with some irony, with an asterisk. But usually it's the whaling chapters that people go, oh, the punishing whaling chapters. Is that what you found tedious, or do you find a different part of the book tedious?
Well, any individual chapter you point at wouldn't necessarily be tedious. But this thing is 135 chapters. And sidebar here, Ishmael really knows how to use a chapter. I will give him credit for that, right? Or Melville in the voice of Ishmael. Every chapter is very narrowly focused on a thing.
Yeah, I appreciated that.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes more than one chapter. For example, we get 3 entire chapters on whaling art. I don't know that was the thing. But so out of 135 chapters, by my estimation, roughly 20 of them are plot-oriented.
That's not a good percentage.
So it's not that any of the other stuff, it's not that I mind reading about the rope that's used in the whaling boat, which does indeed get its own chapter. It's not that I mind reading about the construction of the whaling boat, which gets 3 or 4 chapters scattered across. It's not that I mind reading about pulling buckets of sperm out of the whale, which gets a couple of chapters. There are just a lot of not man chasing the whale chapters in this book that's supposedly man chasing whale.
Yeah, there's that. Okay, so before we dive too deep into this, I have to confess that I did not finish reading this book. And I feel really bad saying that because it is a notorious tough read, and I don't think that reputation is deserved. I think it's sort of a fun and breezy read compared to what you might be expecting. However, it is tangential, let's say.
Yeah, and again, part of this, I picked poorly. We had a really narrow window between our last recording session and this one, comparatively speaking. And Moby Dick is not a book that needs to be sped through. Yeah. It's a book where you should, pick at a chapter or 2 a day and enjoy it, because the language, like I say, it is just any given chunk you pick up and start to read is delightful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's fun writing and fun reading. But you've got, I don't even know how many pages it was, but when you start compounding all this, you lose the ability, when you're power reading through it, you can't stop and marvel at the pretty language. It's like trying to speed read Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Everything that makes the book fun gets lost. And then you're just doing this grind of, I've got to get to the last page before Monday. I think I did it a disservice, which is why I'm waffling on whether or not it'll be a favorite.
Okay. I had a related problem, not quite the same. I enjoy the language a lot also, and I was looking forward to rereading this because I read it in an English literature class like 30 years ago, I want to say. Oh, Lord, maybe 40. And because of the lack of narrative drive, let's say, and because of my insane schedule this month, I'd grab my Kindle and I'd lay in bed and I'd just conk out immediately because there's no story driving you forward. It's just like, oh, here's a whole chapter about how we meet Queequeg and his idiosyncratic bedtime routine. And here's a whole chapter of a sermon in a church about the book of Job. And it's like, yeah, just soporific, man. I mean,
Yeah.
as much as I was appreciating it and enjoying it, it was like I could not stay awake to finish this book. Yeah.
Yeah, and roughly the first 25%, and of course this is great about Kindle because it tells you such things. Roughly the first 25% of this book is fun, and it's funny. Pretty much right up to the time he gets on the whaling ship. And then it stops being fun and funny and starts being well-written documentary. Yeah, and not that there was the narrative drive was the guy gets itchy feet and decides to go on a whaling cruise.
Yeah.
That's the plot for the first 25% of the book, and it suffices. But yeah, I don't know that slog. Again, I think had I taken my time with this, had I spent 2 months, just picking my way through a few chapters a day, I think I would have enjoyed it so much more.
Yeah, that's why I say I think slog is unfair to the quality of the writing and the accessibility of the writing. There are certainly books that are slogs, and this is not one of them. At the same time, it's not a fast read. It is definitely not.
No.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, seamen are loquacious, articulate people with well-developed vocabularies and a penchant for monologuing.
All right, there is a concept called the sort, which is an idea promulgated by a online business guy called Patrick McKenzie, which is the idea that that over time we've gotten better and better at sorting people into classifications. But the farther back in time you go, the less people were sorted, and so the more you found that people like whalers were a broad cross-section of society, and many, many, many of them would be quite articulate and capable of writing the great American novel, for instance. But that as we sort of improve our ability to do that, people who end up in jobs that don't require to be loquacious don't. And so you're sorted into categories where people who are, so I don't know if modern whaling, I don't know if modern whaling is still a thing. The Japanese are still doing it, but they're being pushed out of it, I think, globally. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, almost everyone that opens their mouth in this book just holds forth. And they are poetic and they are articulate and they are literate and well-read.
Yeah.
Stubbs, who is the second mate, I think, on the ship, is a complete asshole. And he spends, I don't know, probably 15 chapters being an asshole to different people or to different things. But again, he just holds forth, and it's MFA level writing as he's sitting there insulting Pip for being small, or if he's sitting there insulting the third mate for being a coward, or things of that nature.
Yeah, and I believe it's entirely possible that in that day, whaling crews were staffed by people like that, and it's not just Melville putting words in their mouths. I mean, obviously it is. This is fiction, but yeah, I think it is in some way drawn from life. Yeah, in a way that people would find surprising. I have one highlight on this book.
Hey, great.
Which is, whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me that requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off, then I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can.
I have this same highlight.
Yeah, and because Ringworld is a favorite of yours, and this immediately struck me as something that Louis Wu might say.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. This guy, he's got ennui. He needs a reason to live. He's been ashore too long, and going to sea is his answer.
Yes.
But again, this is what you're talking about. That sort of language, that sort of playful way that he talks about it, just makes it so much more fun than saying, "Yep, I lost the will to live, and so I decided to go to sea for a while."
Yeah.
It's just so much fun.
So you highlighted it because of the language. I mean, I enjoyed the language a lot also.
Well, the language and the intent behind it. It feels to me like Douglas Adams with a slightly better vocabulary.
Interesting. This feels like Heinlein to me, almost. That sort of curmudgeonly, but well-expressed curmudgeonly. So he's not a true curmudgeon. He's not a misanthrope. Yeah. He's just someone who needs to sort himself out, and he will. Actually, this is a Heinlein trope also. The guy who just can't live in civilized society. He has to take himself farther and farther into to the frontier, to stay sane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is at least partially based on some real life encounters, including a small booklet called The Wreck of the Whale Ship Essex.
Yes.
Did you read that by any chance
I did
before you
not.
started?
I
I always pick that one up before this when they both reside on my Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
I must say always. I haven't read Moby Dick in at least 10 years, but I have read The Wreck of the Whale Ship Essex. Wow, my tongue is tied. More recently.
Yeah.
Now that is basically in chapter 3. A sperm whale attacks the ship and the ship sinks.
Wow.
And then the entire remainder of the book is them surviving adrift at sea for months.
Oh my goodness.
And it does indeed end up with cannibalism. But I mean, Melville makes reference to that book in this book, in Moby Dick. And he actually I don't think he met the author of the whale ship Essex, but he met the son of the author of the whale ship Essex on a whale ship. He sought him out just to get as much of the secondhand story, I guess, at that point as he could.
Yeah, that's awesome. You definitely get the impression this is a well-researched, historically and technically accurate book. Like, if you wanted to appreciate whaling at the time, he's not just pulling this stuff out of inventing it in whole cloth. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there were some inaccuracies, and again, this was like laughable with the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The science of the time is a very important caveat, right? Because he claims to have seen no fewer than 3 harpooners whose skin had been flayed by the acidic spouting of the sperm whale. And I had to stop and research this, and no, that actually doesn't happen. It's not particularly good for your health to stand in the exhalation of the whale. There's a lot of bacteria, there's mucus and funk and all kinds of stuff, but it is not acidic and it won't flay your skin. It may blind you, but it'll be a bacterial infection blinding you, not, So there are some... And they were probably held to be truths at the time.
Yeah.
And again, one has to remind oneself, I'm listening to the ramblings of a character inside a work of fiction. So not a scientific treatise, but I feel like I know a lot more about whaling pre-industrial age, having read it.
So you said you last read this about 10 years ago. How many times have you read Moby Dick?
This is likely the 3rd. It might be the 4th.
All right. So every 10 to 15 years?
That would be a statistical breakdown there.
All right. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, that's sort of our, benchmark for a favorite is if you pick it up not just once or you remember it fondly, but you pick it up again and again and again, you come back to it, and you clearly have many times. So now I feel even worse that you powered through it to meet a deadline that I myself did not meet. And potentially compromise this wonderful book for yourself. Yeah.
Well, I'll put it back in the 10-year rotation, and we'll see if I don't enjoy it the next time I read it, then it'll get demoted. But we'll see. Again, there's no spot in there that I was like, oh, I am not enjoying reading this. It was just I was having to power through things that didn't deserve to be powered through, and because of it, I wasn't appreciating them.
My Kindle edition is 810 pages long.
It's not a small book, and again, I chose poorly for that. And then the additional arrogance of adding another book. Although again, the whale ship Essex is not a long read, but I did, choose to read that before starting the Moby Dick.
I chose poorly in that I chose the Norton Critical Edition, which is a terrific edition if again you have time, but it is footnoted extensively. It is like the measles. Every page is dotted. Goodness. And I am one of those readers that cannot pass up a footnote. I have to look at every single one.
Well, that's a shame because Ishmael actually footnotes his writing, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got footnotes that are meant to be there by the author in addition to whatever the publisher has added.
Yeah.
I have the Amazon Classics edition, and it starts, before we ever get to the book, it has a section of extracts. And it's got a cute little comic intro about a sub-librarian who made it his mission to pull every reference to a whale out of every book he could possibly find. And we get, in the Kindle, about 30 pages of this. Mm-hmm. And they are just from literally all over the place. And they're not necessarily in their own right fun or even accurate or enjoyable. But, we start with, and God created great whales, Genesis. And it just has from the Bible, many, from plays, from documentaries and nature works of the time. Whoever put this together really spent a lot of time. They didn't just go on Google and research whale. Yeah, finding all these extracts, which in no way directly tie to the narrative, but was a kind of fun way to ease us into it.
All right. So there's not, you've established, a lot of story, to this 800-page novel.
Yeah, and the part that you think of, now don't get me wrong, Ahab, early on in the voyage, he summons all hands, and then he says, we're not out here to hunt whales, we're out here to hunt a whale. Mm-hmm. And he gets everybody all fired up and caught up in his madness, except for the first mate, who's like, we still need to make money. So he relents. He allows them to hunt whales, but everyone knows the reason they are out there is to find the white whale. And there's, he just harps on this. He wants us to think that Ahab is obsessed and mad. And unfortunately, he often resorts to actually telling us Ahab is obsessed and mad. But aside from that, the actual conflict, they don't find Moby Dick until the third to the last chapter. So the third to the last and second to the last chapters are the fight with the whale. And they are nowhere near as dramatic as you remember from the movie. Mm-hmm. 135 chapters. And the payoff is this 2-chapter encounter with the whale.
Well, that's Hollywood mining the exciting bits out of novels. Yeah.
You shall not pass.
Yes.
It's a paragraph in the book.
Yeah.
I've just got all kinds of things, especially from the first portion of the book, highlighted that were just fun to read. Let's just pick up shortly after the passage that you read there.
Sure.
So he has decided to go to sea. Now, when I say that I am in the habit of going to sea whenever I begin to go hazy about the eyes and begin to be overconscious of my lungs, I do not mean to have it inferred that I ever go to sea as a passenger. For to go as a passenger, you must needs have a purse, and a purse is but a rag unless you have something in it.
That's fun.
He's got such a delightful way to say, and I'm out of money, I need a job,
I think that's also an idea that appeals to me in the sense that there are people who belong in a place and there are people who are just like being carted along in a place. If you go to sea as a passenger, you're not integral to what is happening there. You are not important. I mean, you're important in that you're, subsidizing the voyage possibly if it's a passenger liner. But there's a way to attend certain things as someone who is plugged into what's in a roundabout way. I'm going to complain about the World Science Fiction Convention.
Go for it.
Which I've attended twice as a fan. And I found that I am not a fan. I am not someone who enjoys fanish behavior and associating with other fans and interacting with people, fan to creator. That is just not something that appeals to me. I wanted to be a creator and deal with creators at the same level. Talk to them about their work and not from a fan perspective. So I will never go to another World Science Fiction Convention unless I go as a published author. And I can see that, even though Ishmael says that his constraint is financial, I don't entirely believe him.
Not entirely. And he does go forth to talk about different roles that he's happy to, but he wants to be part of the family. As you say.
Exactly.
He wants to be the working guy. Now, this is his first whaling voyage. He had gone to sea as a merchanter on all his previous occasions. And this actually becomes problematic for me because during the 120 chapters that we have to come, he often relates stories that he has heard from other sailors that he claims to have witnessed. We know how this ends. It doesn't end well. It ends with him clinging to a coffin alone in the middle of the ocean, and fade to black at that point. He went back to sea on a whaling ship after this, apparently several times to accumulate the stories that he shares with us. I don't buy that. I can buy that he went back to that he would go back to sea, that he might ship out on a merchant ship again, somewhere that's a little more comfortable to him. But I don't see anything about this experience that in the end of the day would have said to him, I should do that again.
Some people are built different, I mean, I had a friend who was a mountain climber and was climbing with a buddy of his, and they fell 600 feet. His friend died. He shattered his leg in several places, and he was lucky enough to retain consciousness so he could drag his broken body to a place where he could be rescued, and still climbs to this day. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I guess they're out there.
Yeah.
The other thing, well, I don't know that it's a separate thing. I guess, whatever. The question becomes also, what are we reading? Right? Because most of this is told first person from Ishmael's point of view.
Yes.
He's either relating his inner thoughts or he's sharing stories or whatnot, but not all of it. There are chapters that tell us from an omniscient point of view what other characters are thinking, what other characters are doing. The first time it happens is on the ship. He describes what it's like in the officers' mess for dinner, to which he's not invited.
Yeah.
But we have these, I just happened to scroll by one where Ahab is staring out the window of his cabin alone and then monologuing to himself.
Yeah.
Where does this come from? So we're never given the context in which are these Ishmael's notes. Is this his journal? It's not presented as a omniscient narrator, except in a few chapters that there's not a way for Ishmael to be there.
Well, I think modern literature has gotten much more particular about how many POVs you can have in a novel and how closely you have to hew to them. Mm-hmm. But if you go back and read, there's a Hemingway short story, The Short Happy Life of Francis McComber, about two tourists who are taken out by a guide to hunt a lion. And Hemingway is all over the place. He's just head hopping like a madman. He's in the husband's head, the wife's head, the guide's head. He hops into the lion's head at one point, and gives you the POV of the lion. And this is, it's completely fictional. It's not presented as a narrative or a diary of any sort. But at the same time, that's the kind of thing that really wouldn't fly today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Whatever. The little bit of story that's there are a couple of things that are problematic. We get well into the book. We're in chapter 42, and suddenly a prophecy appears.
Uh-oh.
This is a good B-movie trope,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's a prophecy involved. Whatever, there can be a prophecy. Do you remember the 5 men that were smuggled aboard the Pequod in secret?
I do not.
All right. This was something I had no memory of either.
All right.
But Ishmael, of course, he's out walking the night before the ship's going to sail, and he thinks he sees some men furtively run onto the ship. Yeah. And then it turns out, after a couple of months at sea, hey, there are 5 men on the ship that we haven't seen before. And Ahab has smuggled his own crew for his own whaling boat.
So they're not exactly stowaways.
They're not exactly stowaways, but they've been hiding under the decks.
But with the permission of the captain.
Ship, and it's fully staffed.
Yeah, that is crazy. But
so they've gone out of the way not to be discovered. But the first time a white whale is sighted or the call goes up, these guys just erupt from the hold and jump into Ahab's whaling boat, and he jumps in there with them, and suddenly there they are. One of them is sort of a witch doctor, prophet, religious man, and he's the one. We're introduced to the prophecy before then, but he's the one who's coaching Ahab as to what has and hasn't happened in the prophecy as we go along. And I had totally misremembered this. In the movie, Ahab gets tied to Moby Dick, and as Moby Dick is swimming away, the crew sees Ahab flailing his arms, saying, follow, and the crew goes after him. No, that happens to the witch doctor guy, and Ahab goes back into and he has a rough time. He loses he lost his leg, right?
Yeah,
we meet him as a peg leg. He loses 2 more legs along the way.
He loses 2 more?
Well,
he loses the peg leg and his real leg.
His peg leg gets broken, and he has a new one fabricated. And then that gets broken, he has another new one fabricated.
Okay.
So he's managed to lose the same leg thrice. I forget where I was going there. Oh, yeah, it's a little bit of leg drama there. But and this is another thing, they're incredibly inconsistent of the number of whale boats that are on the Pequod. There are supposed to be 4. There's 3 plus the captain's boat, which is a spare. Mm-hmm. They break 6 or 7 boats just in regular course of whaling, not even when they fight Moby Dick, and yet there's always another boat handy.
Is this a thing that they can build on board? Do they have supplies of lumber, or can they repair the ones that get broken?
Supplies of lumber. They repair and build stuff on board. They have a forge on this ship.
Oh, that's incredible.
And this is actually something I remember from the movie, but Ahab has a special harpoon forged after they're at sea. He has collected the heads from hobnails from people's boots, and they forge an all-new lance, and they edge it with razor blades, and then it gets quenched in blood. All of the 3 harpooners come up and cut their hands and shed blood to quench it rather than quenching it in water. And then there's a storm, and they get ball lightning on the ship, and ball lightning coalesces on the end of the new harpoon, and he waves it around over the crew. This is at a point where they're starting to get kind of dissatisfied with life.
Yeah.
Because they've been at sea for like a year now, and they haven't found the white whale yet. And anyway, hijinks ensue.
When you say they've been at sea for a year, have they been at sea like they haven't set foot on land? They they not sold their whales that they have hunted up to this point successfully?
So this, again, if he gives us an accurate thing, the typical length of a sperm whale voyage is 3 to 4 years.
Good Lord.
It takes them that long, and they often don't touch shore unless driven by exigency, because their entire ship, when they leave, is filled with provisions, because they have nothing to trade. They're not carrying cargo anywhere. So they've got enough food and water to stay afloat for 3 or 4 years without having to touch land.
Yeah.
And then as they catch whales, right, they actually meet somebody who's on their way home, a ship that's on their way home that was so successful that they had thrown perfectly good food and water overboard to free up more room to store whale oil and the sperm. They had it sitting in cups and spittoons. They had taken over a couple of the sleeping cabins to shove casks into it, just bursting with money that they're trying to sail back to home port.
But so, and I know they don't use the entire whale carcass, but this stuff, they don't have modern refrigeration. This stuff doesn't last for 4 years.
Apparently it does.
Wow. Okay.
So they, and you're right, they don't use that much. So at least for the sperm whale in the book, they strip the blubber, which they render down to oil.
Gotcha. Okay, and that'll hold. That's stable. And then the spermaceti and the ambergris.
The spermaceti.
Yeah.
That word you just said.
Ambergris?
I have never said that word aloud. I've read it many times.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Yeah.
I don't either, but we're going to go with that.
Okay.
So that doesn't come from healthy whales, again, according to the book.
Yeah.
There's this fantastic, Stubbs is the second mate, and like I have said before, he's a complete asshole, but he is good. He is good at his job. He is good at whaling. And they come across a French ship that is crewed by people who don't know what they're doing, captained by somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. And they have found a couple of dead whales floating around. And Stubbs is like, well, dead whales, you can't get any oil out of a dead whale. It's you know, if it's been dead long, it's no good. But one of them had been dead a long time, and this apparently is where you get, I would say ambergris, but ambergris from. So he rows over to this other ship in the spirit of, hey, looking out for you. He's like, you really shouldn't be tied to dead whales. You get sick from breathing dead whale. We've been doing this a long time. This is a bad idea. You should get away from these dead whales as fast as you can. And in fact, to make sure that you're well, I will tie up to this dead whale and paddle that way while you guys sail the other way. So the French sail away, leaving their dead whale, and then he cuts it open and he finds, quantities of ambergris.
Yeah. I believe it's a French word,
hilarious.
so I would say gris. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah. So
they just throw these liquids into casks, and then apparently it's at least stable enough for a 4-year voyage.
Okay, I can see that. If they're rendering the fat down into oil, then that was a huge part of it, because that was, this is all pre-electricity, and houses were lit by oil, and oil was used for other things. And I guess they're just disposing of the meat and the bones and saving the teeth for scrimshaw and whatnot. But
I mean, they peel it. And again, there are chapters devoted to these processes.
I remember there are chapters devoted to this,
and that's terrifying, because they basically put huge block and tackles over the side. They cut a hole in the hide and they start to pull. And there's somebody standing on the whale cutting strips, so the whale starts to unroll. And then you cut a new hole and you put the other block and tackle on it. So you do an A-B thing, spinning this whale over. Well, of course, it's a dead whale and you're peeling it. It's oozing blood, and every shark for 100 miles is there eating it while you're standing on top of a floating, rolling whale trimming the blubber.
Yeah.
But then once they get all of the blubber off of it, then they cut the head off and they hang on to the head to extract the spermaceti, which I still have no idea what it is. But they do that by cutting a hole in the head, and then they take a bucket and dip it in and then hand the bucket up over and over and over.
I don't remember what it's used for. I mean, it's the stuff that fills up a sperm whale's head. Yeah,
right.
It's cerebrospinal fluid, I want to say. I don't know that that's accurate.
I don't know. We get a couple of chapters on the joys of processing it. He
we get
really
a
waxes
chapter
poetic on that.
called, this is one I remember from college reading this, is A Squirt of the Hand, where it's the most weirdly homoerotic thing, where an entire male crew is they're having a water tickle fight with sperm whale sperm. Yeah. And it's just,
That is bizarre. Apparently it sets up, so they have to sit there and knead it with their hands to keep it from setting up. And they sit around tubs of it, shoulder to shoulder. And while you're reaching in there, squeezing handfuls of sperm, you're also grabbing your neighbor's hand from time to time. And it's just so delightful and soothing and sweet and wonderful.
yeah. And I just remember a lot of, isn't it great to be men on the sea doing man things like squirting sperm whale spermaceti at each other? Yeah.
Yep. It is kind of a bizarre little moment there. Okay, we talked about this is pre-electricity. At least we were thinking it was pre-electricity. But the word refrigerators is used in here. And it's talking about, what chapter are we in here? He's talking about other whales, which he decides are fish, by the way. What would become of a Greenland whale in those shuddering icy seas of the north if unsupplied with his cozy surtout? We're talking about the blubber here. True, other fish are found exceedingly brisk in those Hyperborean waters. Hyperborean, I love when people slip that in there. But these, be it observed, are your cold-blooded lungless fish whose very bellies are refrigerators.
Yeah, so this is pre-electric refrigerator. This is an ice box, I think. I believe, yeah.
I thought that word coincided with, compressed gas, chilling, because ice boxes were ice boxes.
Oh, well, actually, okay. Artificial refrigeration was first demonstrated in 1748. We didn't get mass production of electric refrigerators for home use until 1913, and they weren't widespread until the 40s. So it could be that he's referring to like an industrial refrigerator.
Yeah, it could be. I just found it odd.
First practical refrigerator using a vapor compression cycle was invented in 1834, which is about 17 years before this book was written. So, yeah, could be. But yeah, we didn't have electric lights in homes until the 20s. People were still lighting their homes by oil lamps and candles.
And Iolani Palace was the first structure, the first governmental ruling structure to be electrified.
Yeah, I heard that the other day, and that just blows my mind.
Yeah. I think they also were the first to have the telephone.
Really?
Yeah, it was purely from, upstairs, downstairs to inside the building itself, but
yeah,
they had a telephone before the White House.
One of the, if not the oldest community theater in the United States was the Honolulu Community Theater, which is now Diamond Head Theater. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had air conditioning back before air conditioning existed. Mm-hmm. There are ducts through the floors, and in the basement they would put huge blocks of ice, and they would fan this cool air over the ice through these ducts in the floor. The ducts in the floor are very handy when you're running cables for cameras or microphones inside the theater. They're very particular about cable runs there.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if there's a quote people know from Moby Dick that they don't know, they know from Moby Dick. Towards thee I roll, thou all-destroying but unconquering whale. To the last I grapple with thee. From hell's heart I stab at thee. For hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee. Goosebumps, man.
That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan, man.
Yep.
What else struck me? The coffin. Queequeg's coffin. Now, again, in the movie, the coffin pops up and he saves himself by hanging on to it.
Yeah.
The book is a little bit different. Now, Queequeg does come close to death. They do build him a coffin, and then he recovers and he carves it and he uses it for a storage chest. And there is a coffin there. But they have a little life-saving buoy that's attached to the back of the boat, and it gets destroyed. I don't remember if it was destroyed in a storm or with a conflict with one of the whales. Something happens and that little thing is destroyed. So they take the coffin and they repurpose it. They caulk it up, they seal it, they nail it shut, and they wrap it and cover it in pitch, and it replaces the life-saving buoy. So it's not nearly as poetic as just a coffin popping up and carrying him to safety. No, it was a thoroughly repurposed life-saving buoy of a coffin that he clings to.
Still works. I think still works.
Not quite as visually stunning as the other.
All right. So speaking of Queequeg, his introduction is interesting because it's not like we meet him on the ship. Ishmael meets him ashore, and he meets him because he's trying to find a room and he doesn't have much money. And the innkeeper says, well, you can share this bed, and the guy isn't here. And it's Queequeg's bed, and he comes back and surprises him in the night. What I was fascinated by, I mean, that's just an awkward situation, which I would have declined from the get-go. I don't want to be sleeping in another man's bed when I don't know if and when they're going to come home. It's just potential danger there, I think. And Queequeg is unlike anyone this guy has ever seen before. He's covered in tattoos, and he's been trying to peddle a head around the town. And that doesn't put him off either. I mean, it does. He feels uncertain about it, but it doesn't dissuade him from hopping into this man's bed while he's not awake. And when Queequeg does come and he's shocked by his appearance, he spends a lot of time trying to reassure himself that, well, he's just a fellow like me. I mean, so what if he's got these crazy tattoos? And so what if his skin is marred? And so what if he's a headhunter / headmonger? I should not be so quick to judge. And it seems like that's exactly the kind of thing you should judge somebody on.
Yeah, they are surprisingly matter-of-fact and accepting of the fact that cannibals are about.
Yeah.
Right? That many of the people that are working on whale ships and they're hanging around the docks looking for jobs and whatnot are cannibals.
Yeah.
They're from cannibal tribes. So they're out seeing the world, and there's not necessarily any reason to think they're going to start gnawing on you. But everyone's just kind of fine with this. I mean, the level of tolerance, and religious tolerance, Queequeg prays to I've forgotten the name. He's got a little fetish idol thing with a silly name, Yomo. I'm about to say YOLO, but that's not it. But whatever. And at some point he even joins Queequeg in his observances, thinking, well, Queequeg went to church and tried it out. Why shouldn't I try this out? And God wants to be observed. Who's to say this isn't a way to do it?
It really struck me as a surprisingly modern attitude, which I didn't remember from this book and was surprised to find here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's a lot of that goes through the book. I mean, the idea of tolerance and acceptance, I won't say it's consistent throughout the book, but it does come up in multiple places. Mm-hmm. As long as it's not a white whale with a crooked jaw.
Well, as long as it's not Ahab. I don't think anyone else has a vendetta against the whale.
And this is the other thing. Ahab was just a whaling captain until the previous voyage, and he encountered Moby Dick, and he lost his leg, and he went absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
I was hoping for more of a backstory. Again, I have forgotten a lot of this book. I wanted it to have been a lasting feud, like he had lost his leg 10 years ago, or that Ahab has a scar that runs completely down his face and neck and presumably down under his clothing that is never explained. And I wanted it to be, he's encountered Moby Dick twice, and both times he's come away maimed, and that's a better story. No, he was just out on a cruise trying to catch a whale, lost his leg, and the madness became.
Yeah, I mean, that's Captain Hook's backstory too. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I don't know. We don't get to spend a lot of time with Ahab pre this encounter. I think this is my own prejudice showing. I think people like this often, if you look back at their behavior, you see signs of monomania that were channeled towards good purposes. I mean, he was probably an excellent whaling captain, and I think that requires a certain amount of monomania, to be that intensely focused on something that's going to take you through extreme conditions, dangerous conditions, for years at a time. Monomania serves you well there. And then when it gets redirected, it serves you less well.
Now that word monomania, they use that repeatedly when describing Ahab. Different characters use it in their descriptions as they're talking about him. And Ishmael is very partial to that word as well. So I think it's interesting that you pulled that one out of the air.
It's a good word. I might have pulled it out of 40 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. Now, apparently, though, it wasn't instant, right? He lost his leg. He was shipped home. He barely survived the trip. And then during that time of his convalescence, when he's stuck in his cabin on the ship looking at the ceiling, then when he's stuck in his bed at home looking at the ceiling, that's slowly that madness took him. And then it got really, 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 really bad, but he was still an invalid, so nobody was around to notice it getting really, really, really bad. And by the time he was up on his feet and back out in the world again, he had learned to internalize it. So we get that journey, secondhand or third hand, from Ishmael. But yeah, I wanted there to be more history to it, other than last time I was out, I lost a leg. Now I'm mad about it.
Well, I mean, it's not surprising that film adaptations are not accurate reflections of the book, because this is the story we want. We want the story of the man who is obsessed and who chases a whale. And we want the adventure of chasing the whale. And we want the conflict, and we want it to happen more than once. We don't want it to be a single encounter. And this novel gives us very little of that. It gives us a lot of other stuff, which is, as you say, delightful in its way, but it's not that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, very much not the book. Well, I don't know what I thought I remembered about it. An awful lot of this it felt new. So it's been long enough since I read it that a lot of those details were gone. Yep, I remembered like 5 out of 135 chapters.
That can be good and bad. I find it delightful. Robert B. Parker is one of my favorite authors, and he's written something like 60 books. And when I get to the point where I've forgotten sufficient detail that I can go back and read them all again, I'm just like, oh, yes, here we go. Yeah, but it takes a while. Yeah.
It does.
So,
any last thoughts on?
I've exhausted all my thoughts.
your one highlighting and your 10-year-old memory? Yeah, 40-year-old memory?
Yes.
I did enjoy revisiting this.
Good. I'm glad to hear it's not going out of the rotation, that you'll pick it up again. And
more leisurely chance the next time it comes around.
I think it deserves that.
Yeah. So for those of you that haven't read it, I don't know that this is the most glowing endorsement, but leave yourself time to savor it. This is a marathon steak. This isn't a cheeseburger.
Yes.
So enjoy it and take your time doing it.
Indeed. Second that.
All right, so then what are we going to do next?
Next, we have the first book by Michael Lewis called Liar's Poker.
I am not familiar with this one.
It's going to turn out to be a significant book, I think, if you appreciate financial history. So,
all right. Well, we will see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.